A question I often see in my comment section and something that I commonly discuss but never directly talk about is the fact that can you daily a vintage motorcycle? And in today's video I'm going to go a little bit more into detail into that topic for those who are looking for these vintage bikes who want to put a good amount of miles on them per year, because the answer is yes and no at the same time. It heavily depends on a couple of key factors that I want to go over. The first key factor is, what are you defining as a vintage motorcycle? What motorcycle exactly are you looking for? Is it a Japanese bike? Is it an old British bike? Is it a British bike from right before they went bankrupt? Because those things matter a lot. When we talk about vintage bikes, and what I define them here on this channel, is motorcycles somewhere between the late 40s, early 50s till about the mid 80s. After about the mid 80s you get into some of the modern classics, and before the 50s you get into some of the bikes that are beginning to be classic. Then before, I would say, the 30s you get into bikes that I would consider antique. But that 50s to mid 80s category, there's a lot of different bikes that fall into there, and there's a lot of advancements that happen between a bike from 1951 and 1984. So let's talk about the vintage Japanese bikes first and foremost, because that I feel like would be the more targeted motorcycle demographic right now, and there's a good reason why. And that's because the Japanese bikes are very reliable, and when you take care of them, they almost never break. Keep in mind, we're now dealing with 40, 50-year-old motorcycles, but even with that said, these Japanese bikes have proven to be bulletproof. If you find yourself a nice example of an old Japanese machine with some lower miles on it, maybe some service history as well, you're probably going to have a fantastic time, and you'll probably be able to put a lot of miles on that machine. I bought my 1976 CB750 turnkey. That motorcycle has given me very few issues, and I can confidently say that it's never left me with a major problem that I'm not able to drive it for weeks on end. If I wanted to daily ride that CB750, in fact last year there were several week periods where I would just simply ride that CB750. I have all the confidence in that bike to take me from point A to point B reliably. You're looking at GPZs, Z1s, KZ900s, KZ1000s, GS750s, and all of the smaller iteration of those bikes. I own 100% say if you properly maintain them, you can ride them on a consistent basis. And I would even go as far as to say that you can rely on these bikes to get you from point A to point B if you really need to be somewhere. Now take that with a small grain of salt, as once again it is a 50 or 60-year-old motorcycle in some cases, and things are going to go wrong. And that's the biggest thing with vintage bikes. Before we even touch on the British bikes, the big thing is if you're not capable of turning a wrench whatsoever and doing small diagnosis to the bikes, you most likely will end up with a not so positive experience. I've had some people tell me, my bike was like endless problems, I could never figure out what was wrong with it, and it's just minor little tweaks that, hey, if you try to find your way around the bike on a nice Sunday, you look at the owner manuals, you watch videos on it, you can figure out the small minute thing that's going on with your bike, and then the next time it happens, or next time something similar happens, you right away can diagnose it and get your bike back on the road in less than an hour. The bike will leak a little bit of oil, small things will come up here and there, the seals are going to be getting old, you'll have to replace things, you'll have to do a little bit of servicing, especially if the bike has not already had the services, but for the most part, with an old Japanese machine, you can kick it, you can push the starter button, and you can ride away with it. Old Japanese machines are awesome, and there's a reason why they took over the market so incredibly quickly. It's because they are truly this turnkey machine even 50 years later. So when people ask me, I'm thinking about buying a CB750, but I don't want it to be a showroom queen, I absolutely think that you can get on the bikes and ride them like they're meant to be used. I still hear of people saying, just a few years ago I put 1,000 miles on a single trip on my CB750. And I'd love to do that. I haven't done that yet, but I wouldn't be hesitant after a couple hours of servicing and taking care of the small things on my bike to go take it on a multi-hour road trip. In fact, we did do that with one of the CB750s last year, putting around maybe 300 to 400 miles on a weekend with the bike. Not talking about some of the British machines. Before we touch on that topic, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you find videos like this informational and you love old bikes as much as I do, go down and subscribe, because we have a ton more content coming. And in fact, there's a new British bike coming to the channel in less than a week. Now, British bikes are a little bit of a different story. Bikes of the early 50s aren't so daily rideable as motorcycles of the 70s are. A bike like my Triumph T140 Bonneville, I might hesitate a little bit compared to a Japanese bike, but it's a 1975, and after I go through it and give it a good once over and I'm satisfied with where it is because I bought the bike as a barn find, I wouldn't hesitate to take it places. But the problem and the thing is with 70s British bikes that smaller things are going to happen more often than I find happening with Japanese bikes. There's going to be more small things, and if you really aren't that mechanically inclined, or if you just refuse to learn about the bike, you're not going to like it. At the end of the day, I think owning a vintage bike, one of the joys of owning it is fixing the small things and really getting to know your bike. Even with newer machines, I find knowing your machine is something that a motorcyclist should just do. If you're not capable of turning a wrench, watch a couple YouTube videos. I mean, it's really not that hard. As you work on things more, you pick up more things and you're able to diagnose more, but one small issue with one bike that you own, a little bit of Googling and a couple hours of troubleshooting, you can probably fix the issue. Now, even the 70s British bikes, they still have some things like sludge straps and right-hand shifts and some of the weird quirks that the British bikes had even in the 50s. So all of those things are a little bit more apparent, as well as some things just breaking a little bit more easily and some electrical problems happening where the Japanese tend to not have those. After my Bonneville is fully fixed up, there's a couple of downsides. The fact that it's a right-hand shift, and the fact that it doesn't have electric start. Other than that, and maybe some electrical stuff coming up, I could feel fairly confident about riding it consistently to A to B. Is it going to get me there as reliably as a Japanese bike? Maybe not. I find that if a British bike starts, that's the hardest part, and if it's starting, it's running, and it's running good, you most likely will be able to make it to your destination. Now, British bikes get a little flack in terms of the reliability, and that's kind of why they went bankrupt, but they really aren't too bad, and they're not very sophisticated either. If you've come from working on a Japanese bike to a British bike, there's a little bit of a steeper learning curve because there's a lot more mechanical things going on, but a little bit of troubleshooting and being patient with it, you can find out all the problems you have with them. Now, when you get into bikes from the early 50s to the mid 60s, give or take, all of those bikes will have drum brakes in the front and the rear. Some of the bike's suspension components can be a little bit dodgy. You have plunger suspension. I believe at that point they had completely gotten rid of the rigid suspensions, which fall into the classic territory. But the bikes from the era like to breathe oil. They like to breathe from the engine sump, and they will drip oil no matter what. There's nothing like fixing that. They're going to be a little drippy, they're going to be a little leaky, and some bikes that are a little bit more quirky than some of the other bikes, like a standard twin, well, those bikes, they're a little harder to kick over. Now, this probably applies to nobody who's watching this video, but Vincent, for example, the V-twin in a Vincent is very hard to kick over. The Ariel Square 4. The Ariel Square 4 is a very hard motor to kick over, and those bikes like to be cold-blooded, so you gotta sit there and really take your time to warm them up and go through the cycle, go through the starting procedures, and that's the thing of the bikes from the era. You can daily ride them, and you can take them from A to B. They don't have turn signals, the suspension's gonna be a little bit more uncomfortable, but they're still fun motorcycles, and they're very mechanical. Just the downside is it takes a lot of effort to start them up, to take them through the cycles, to get them to where they need to be in order to even ride them. So that extra step and precaution needs to be taken with some of those motorcycles. Now, some other things that are a little less quirky, like a Dami, a Norton Atlas, a BSA Golden Flash, Super Rocket, bikes like that. Those motorcycles, once again, fall into the territory of the 70s bikes. The later 70s bikes actually started to get electric start. Norton in the last year with the Commando had electric start. The Bonneville started to get electric start and dual disc brakes and all of these things that, well, these early bikes did not have. They had drums, they had kickstarters, and they had right-hand shifts. It even goes as far as they still had pre-unit construction with the engine and the gearbox separate. Now, other than the fact that they don't have some of the amenities, and compared to my 1974 Triumph Bonneville, it doesn't have turn signals, but other than that, the same things apply to these twins. Change your oils on time, ride the bikes, I think you can have a fantastic experience with them. To boil it down, can you daily ride an old vintage bike? The answer is yes, but it all depends on you and the particular motorcycle you're looking for. I think anyone pretty much can daily ride a well taken care of Japanese bike. I think most people with a little bit of willingness to learn about some of the 70s British bikes can daily ride them pretty easily. I think it takes a little bit of a different person to daily ride a bike from the 50s. If you're looking at bikes from the early 80s, I think those bikes are really perfect from even modern standards. They don't have fuel injection, they don't have a bunch of complicated things to them. If you're looking for a bike to ride, you can't get more turnkey than those bikes are. Those are my opinions on the topic, and if you guys want to see me daily ride my 1953 BSA Golden Flash for an entire week straight, nothing else, hit the like button and I might consider it. With that said, if you guys are looking for some of the misconceptions people have about some of these older vintage bikes, check this video out here. And if you want to watch another video on some of my other bikes, check this one out here.